All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're going to break down a really fascinating and, incredibly influential 1979 sermon by the Reverend Sun Myung Moon. We're going to dig into his diagnosis of what's wrong with the world and the pretty radical solution he proposed, all built around this idea he called heavenly law.
Right off the bat, he hits you with this powerful claim. This really sets the stage for everything else. The argument is kind of simple when you think about it. If there's one God, then there must be one ultimate truth. And if there's one truth, well, it follows that there should only be one church teaching it. This single idea is pretty much the foundation for his entire worldview.
So that leads us to the first big problem that Moon is trying to solve. In a world with one God, why on earth are there so many different religions? And why do they all claim they're the only ones who have it right?
He uses a really interesting analogy to explain this. He doesn't just say, that other religions are flat out wrong. Instead, he sees them as partial truths. It's like they're all branches on the same tree. They're all connected to the root, that's God, but none of them are the complete central trunk, which represents the full, unadulterated truth.
And here's the crucial point. Who gets to grade the test? Who gets to say what's 100% correct? Well, according to this sermon, that's up to God and God alone. And the big problem for all of us, as he sees it, is that no religion out there has managed to get that perfect score. They're all falling short in some way. So from this big global theological problem, Moon then zooms way in on one specific country to show this spiritual crisis in action: America. In his sermon, he really uses the nation as a case study for a society that has lost its moral compass. He makes the case that America used to be a beacon for the world, right? A nation that set the standard for everyone else. But by the late 70s, he felt that standard was just crumbling, that the country was on a very clear downward trajectory. And he's not vague about it either. He gets very specific about the symptoms of this decline. He points to things like racial conflict, the breakdown of the family, churches becoming empty because people see no value in them, and just this general erosion of what truth and love even mean. To him, these aren't just social problems, they're signs of a really deep spiritual sickness. And this slide does a great job of laying out his historical explanation for how we got here. He says society's focus has shifted dramatically over time. First, you had Godism, where life revolved around God. Then that gave way to humanism, which put mankind at the center of the universe. And finally, that devolved into materialism, where the only thing that really matters is stuff. And that, he says, left people feeling spiritually empty. Okay, so after laying out this whole problem of materialism and spiritual decay, Moon offers his solution. And this is where things get really, really interesting, because he proposes a total revolution in our thinking, starting with the basic idea of ownership. He argues that the root cause of every single human conflict, we're talking everything from family arguments to world wars, it all comes down to this one simple, flawed idea: the concept of mine. The belief that something belongs only to you or your family or your nation, that, in his view, is the source of all conflict. And this chart here just lays it out so clearly. The way we usually think is on the left, but the heavenly view completely flips it on its head. Your notebook? It belongs to the world. Your country? It belongs to the world. Your church? It belongs to the world. And the world itself? It doesn't belong to us. It belongs to God. Now, the logic here is that by giving up your claim to things for a higher purpose, by dedicating your possessions to your country to the world, and the world to God, you actually paradoxically gain ownership of everything on a much higher level. He compares it to fishing. You have to sacrifice the small bait to catch a much, much bigger fish. Okay, so that's the philosophy. But how do you actually live like that? This brings us to the practical side of things, a very strict code that he calls heavenly law. And let's be absolutely clear, this sermon doesn't present this as a list of friendly suggestions. Heavenly law is an absolute, non-negotiable, unchangeable code. Following it is seen as mandatory if you want to help restore humanity and achieve what he calls God's ideal. One of the central practices for living this law is the idea of a home church. Now, this isn't about a building. It's about members actively creating a spiritual family, a kind of tribe, in their own community. And the sermon explains that there's this crucial link. Whatever you build on earth, spiritually, gets mirrored in the spirit world, and that's how you secure your place there. To truly live this way, followers have to go through a whole formal process of transformation. It's called a recreation course. And the goal is, well, It's incredibly ambitious. It's to undo all the spiritual damage of human history and restore God's original perfect plan.
This course has 3 very specific stages. First, you recreate material, which is done through fundraising to learn that material things are just tools for higher purpose. Second, you recreate man. By witnessing, that means sharing the faith and teaching others. And finally, the third step is to recreate heart, which is about learning to love other people unconditionally, something that's forged through intense practice and hardship.
But even after going through this entire intensive recreation course, the journey is still not over. It all leads up to a final ultimate test. Moon lays out this series of 3 judgments that every single person has to pass to prove that they've really made the transformation. And this is not a metaphor. The sermon describes this as a literal, rigid screening process. If you want to return to God, you've got to pass through these 3 gates. There are no shortcuts. So, what are they? First up is the judgment of words. Do you really know and believe in the core teachings, the divine principle? Second is the judgment of personality. Okay, it's not enough to just know the words. Have you actually lived them? Have you become the person those words describe? And then, the final and highest test is the judgment of heart. After all of that, is there genuine, selfless love inside you? I love this analogy he uses to explain the whole process. He compares a person to a chestnut. All the hardships, the strict rules, maybe even persecution, that's the thorny, prickly outer husk. But going through all that is what develops a rich, valuable character on the inside. The goal is to become so rich internally that when life cracks you open, everyone can see the incredible value you have inside. So, to wrap it all up, the sermon paints this picture of a world that's spiritually decaying, full of fragmented truths. And the solution it offers is a total paradigm shift, dedicating everything you think you own, everything you are, to the world and then to God, by following this strict, unchangeable heavenly law. And that really leaves us with a pretty profound question about faith and sacrifice. If you were presented with something you were absolutely convinced was the ultimate 100% truth, what rules, what laws, what kind of life would you be willing to live by to follow it? It's definitely something to think about.